Stan Lee was a big loss for all of us. He created a massive world full of characters that we know and love today, and he's definitely going to be missed by so many fans. My favourite cameo would have to be Spider-Man 3, where he says to quote, "I guess one person can make a difference," which is exactly what he did. Goodbye, Stan Lee.
Stan Lee's ability as a creator didn't necessarily just come from his imagination, which, while vast and impressive, it came really from his understanding that superheroes are not just figures to be dressed up in brightly coloured costumes and thrown at other superpowered beings. Superheroes are there to represent aspects of our society, to represent things that we might become. The X-Men is of course the most obvious example of this. The X-Men have always represented a minority group. And it's that sort of humanist philosophy that he had behind his work, which is what gives it such longevity. It's one of the reasons I have such admiration for him. He didn't just want to come out and make superhero stories. He wanted to come out and make art and make stories that really mattered and could actually institute real change. And that is why his legacy is going to live on far beyond his death, and in truth far beyond a lot of us.
It's a sad day. Stan Lee has passed away, which just sucks. It really does suck. You know, you have to, these days you have to be living under a rock to not know who Stan Lee is. And Stan Lee, for me personally, I knew of him, thought he was the voice of Marvel for a long time when I was a kid, because he used to be a narrator and he'd pop up in the cartoons and stuff like that. It wasn't until I had a day off school, I was pretending to be sick, I imagine, and I watched Sky Movies, and there was a film / documentary called Stan Lee's Mutants, Monsters and Marvels, I believe it's called. I might have got that the wrong way around, but regardless. And yeah, I remember watching that and being like, oh, I know Stan Lee. And then you sit there and you watch it, and an hour and a half, and you're like, he did all of that. Like, obviously he had other creators and collaborators with him and stuff, Jack Kirby of course, and Steve Ditko, but you sit there and think, wow, he's created a whole universe just through emotions and, you know, how he's feeling at the time, and it's just incredible what he's done. It will never be matched, it will never be done again. So, you know, that's one of my favourite things I ever remember of Stan Lee, is the fact that I watched that documentary, and because it was on Sky Movies, it was on repeat a lot, so I watched it a lot of times and probably taped it on old VHS. But yeah, it's a sad day knowing that Stan's gone, but I'm just glad he's reunited with Joni. So thank you very much, Stan, for, well, personally for me, for Spider-Man. And, you know, everyone says Excelsior, so this time I'm going to be like, enough said. Rest in peace, Stan.
So, whilst it was news I think we're all expecting, it was really sad news this week about Stan the man, Stan the legend, Stan Lee. What does Stan mean to me? Well, I'm 51 years old. I've kind of grown up reading Stan stuff all my life, really. I remember as a kid going to newsagents and buying, back in those days you could buy American comics in newsagents. Yep, I'm that old. And I loved his stories. I loved seeing the responses to letters from this guy called Stan, who always seemed so personable and clearly loved what he did and clearly loved his readers, and that's carried on. You see him in films, you see him, you know, everything he's done, he clearly had a love for the medium and love for his characters. When I think of Stan, I think of kind of, if anything stands out for me, it's these guys. Fantastic Four, always been my favourites. I've collected a full run up to like way back to number 50, and my goal in life, I guess, is to have a full set. So I want to say thank you, Stan. Thanks for everything you created. The characters have felt like they were real, for the Fantastic Four. And yeah, I mean, I even today put this t-shirt on and I kind of go, it's my Sandman t-shirt. Clearly it's not, it's just a stripy t-shirt. But that's I think the lasting stuff that Stan did for us. We'll look at stuff that us as geeks will go, oh yeah, that's something from a comic, even though it's clearly not. So thank you, Stan, you legend. May you rest in peace. Thank you for all you gave us.
So I could talk about Stan Lee for hours and hours on end, and I have done, and will continue to, because the man has created a legacy for a lot of people, myself included. But to to talk about my personal experience and what the man meant to me. My story, my trajectory, my path in life could all be directly linked back to Stan Lee. When I was a kid, I was petrified of Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby's Incredible Hulk TV show, and I found out that it was a comic book character. So using my logic, I begged my dad to buy me Hulk comics so that I could get over my fear. That was my introduction to the Marvel Universe, to a character that Stan created, and I inadvertently fell head over heels in love with the medium, and have been obsessed ever since. That led me to opening up my own comic book shop, which then led me to writing my own comic book, which led me to where I am today, when in just a month and a half I'm going to be directing my first feature film. I wouldn't be doing this without the works of Stan. I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have owned my comic book shop. I wouldn't have written Video Nasty. Thank you, Stan Lee, for all of your work and your passion, and for making me forever a true believer.
What does Stan Lee mean to me? Well, I'm a huge Marvel fan, as you can tell by the wall in the shop. He's been a massive influence on my life with the Marvel comics and everything, and obviously he will be missed, but he will not be forgotten. He's left a massive legacy behind, and we thank him for that.
My favourite memory of Stan Lee is when I met him during Comic-Con in London. It was his last UK appearance. He was a very nice guy, and yeah, I said a couple of words to him. He was very nice. My other favourite memory is watching Spider-Man cartoons when I was younger. I used to love the animated series from the 90s. Absolute favourite Spider-Man cartoon to date.
So we lost Stan Lee this week, true legend. Growing up in this country, there weren't any comic shops when I was a kid, so I was very, very fortunate to find a little local newsstand at my train station. When I was about 6, 7 or 8, I was very lucky. When I was a kid, comics were about 28 to £1. So I used to be able to pick up those every time I came home by the train, and it was really, really nice. And I wasn't into Beano and Dandy, and these American things really changed my view of comics. Now, Stan didn't invent comics, but he was probably the best and loudest voice, the most personable voice out there, and I think that really warmed me to the medium. I never met Stan. I have seen him at conventions, but I never had a chance to chat to him. But he changed my life, and he really inspired me to get into comics, so thank you, Stan.
Stan Lee's death is quite profound for a lot of us, if we ignore that twat Bill Maher, who, no, we'll ignore him. Stan Lee was the first guy whose work I remember actually reading and knowing his name, like in a proper author sense. As you can see in the background, I have quite a lot of books with Stan Lee's name in. He was unique. He was a revolutionary. He was a visionary. And in every revolution, there's one man with a vision. And in the comics revolution, that was Stan Lee.
What does Stan Lee mean to me? Well, so many things. The dude was a god. Everything from the narration on the 80s Hulk cartoon to all his cameos in the new movies. My fondest memory, I would have to say, is going back to like 1985. I won a Spider-Man competition in the UK Spider-Man magazine. I was about 7 years old, and I got a letter from Stan Lee. I realise now that it was just a generic letter, and everyone got one. They just changed the names and stuff on it. But imagine being a 7-year-old child and getting a letter from Stan Lee congratulating you from winning the competition. To me, it was like fucking Santa had just replied back to me. Do you know what I mean? It was unbelievable. So the man means so much to me. I just can't explain how much he really does and has affected my life. Everything from, I wouldn't have the friends I would have to this day without Stan the man. I really honestly don't know what else to say. The only other thing I hold dear is this. And yes, it is 100%. 100% Amazing Fantasy, 100% Amazing Spider-Man, and 100% Stan Lee. Rest in peace, my brother. Take it easy.
I feel like I'm a little bit late into understanding who Stan Lee was. The first time I saw Stan was in 2002 in the Sam Raimi's Spider-Man film, and I knew back then that he was the father of Marvel, but I never really understood why people were so fascinated by him and interested in who he was. And it wasn't until 2015, when the Ant-Man film came out, that I truly understood what he meant to people. Watching the Ant-Man film absolutely blew my mind, and it's what makes me who I am today. I mean, I spend my money on that character, I collect that character, and that wouldn't be done if it wasn't for Stan, who created this character. From the film, I looked into Stan Lee's work, understood his writing style, understood the story arc of Ant-Man, that I was absolutely just blown away by. All of that just led to this moment in time in my life where I've created friends that I didn't think I'd ever have. I mean, I've got Danny, I've got Jay, I've got P. All of these people are into Marvel and comic books, and it wasn't until this film of Ant-Man came out that I got hooked into comic books. And this film wouldn't have been created if it wasn't for Stan Lee creating this character. So, Stan Lee, thank you for everything you have done. You've made me meet loads of great people, and your work was absolutely incredible. You have left a massive footprint in the comic world, and you'll be truly missed. Thank you.
One thing I do remember about Stan Lee, this was back in 2003, he created a television show called Stripperella. It was a sort of James Bond style comedy action animated series. The main character, Agent 69, is voiced by Pamela Anderson, and she would fight various villains, comical villains, the likes of Dr. Pushy, Queen Clitoris, and even Mark Hamill lends his voice as another villain called Dr. Caesarean.
Because my whole life beautiful girls have spurned my advances, I vowed that one day I would make them all pay.
Stan Lee does make his own cameo in there.
Eureka! Check out my new invention! You guys are gonna freak out! The future is now!
What is it?
It's a portable telephone!
And also, weirdly, Vince McMahon, the owner of WWE, lends his voice, Survival Strip Club owner.
Stuart McMahon! What are you doing here?
Came to check out the competition, or should I say, lack of competition.
Stan Lee will be sorely missed by all of us. He is one of the greatest men I've heard of. Nobody has a bad thing to say about him. He created such a great world for all of us. He would always be remembered for his great cameos in all the Marvel films. Stan Lee, Godspeed to you, my friend. Rest in peace. Excelsior!